Sear, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Sear is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Sear.
So it's like, what are you going to do at that point? Sarah's not used to this at all. She has no idea like what she was in for by subbing in for Christina today.
It's true. I do put the clips together. I do put them all together for social media, but you're right though. I don't have any idea what goes on here.
Yeah, but as we were just saying, you don't actually listen to the podcasts. And so like, I feel like the clips, if you just hear the clips that you guys put out, your expectation of me is probably very different than like the reality of me.
I feel like a lot of science with Steve. That's all I hear. A lot of science with Steve. You make a lot of really good points and a lot of deep points on the podcast.
Until he doesn't have medication.
Or until I start talking about butt magic.
That's true.
Which
speaking of which,
butt magic.
Speaking of Steven's butt magic, what are we talking about today? We are talking about, well, the topic is named mindful indulgence, but I feel like we're going to be speaking a lot about maybe free meals or meal guidelines or finding flexibility within a structure when we're trying to keep a good kind of nutrition, health, fitness, whatever long-term goal, and also navigate things like travel, trips, family holidays, summer. This is also really awesome for, when the holidays come around. And probably a lot of people have like weddings and stuff this summer. So like, how do you kind of navigate those types of things? And I mean, I don't know, how do you guys navigate that with your clients?
Like, or not, right?
Or not.
Obviously not everybody's like ready for that or should be doing that.
Absolutely. And that's actually a note that I have written down is, where is it appropriate for? Because you're right. It's not appropriate in all situations.
I think
so. Where would it why don't we start with where would it not be appropriate? I'm sorry, Sarah. I totally just cut you off. Hi, Sarah's with us.
Hi. No, I actually like that. I kind of like differentiating maybe at the top. It's like who is this appropriate for and who is this not appropriate for? And I think that comes down to the client and maybe how long they've been with you, how well you know them, and also in their check-ins, what season are they in? What is their mindset going into this, maybe it's an anxious trip or a business trip or a holiday or a wedding, and kind of finding out how are they feeling about it, mentally and physically. Are we in an improvement season, a maintenance phase, a building phase? Are we in a dieting phase? And kind of going off that. And maybe I like starting off by asking them, what are your goals for this trip? What kind of mini goals for you make the most sense for you realistically going into this trip? Because every travel, every trip, every time we go into these holidays or situations, they're all different and we can all learn from that. But I think it starts with maybe setting up some goals based upon the individual and what's right for them.
That's weird that you say that it's all different, because every time I go to my parent or my grandparents for the holidays, like I just sit around, we watch something useful or useless on TV that most of the time nobody's paying attention to, and my mom and my grandma talk about knitting and crocheting. So it's like it's the same every time. But I guess we don't go on like family vacations. I felt that's a thing. I forget about that sometimes, right?
Well, and I was going to say that's normal. That's the same thing for you, but like I don't have a situation like that. Right? And I think
you were just at home, didn't you? Like that's why you've not been on the podcast. You were visiting the fam dog. What wasn't that the truth?
Not my mom, because my mom doesn't live in Calgary, and I don't have grandparents that are alive. And I know no one who crochets. I mean, I'm sure that I do, but like I didn't do that. My dad and I went grocery shopping and meal prep together, literally. So like that's different. Of course my dad would be. Anyways, I think what like Sarah, like it really depends on the situation. It depends on if you travel for work versus is this vacation versus family versus your hierarchy of importance. And just because something is important, it doesn't also mean that we just need to partake in everything, because maybe you have 4 weddings this year. Okay, that's great to like go to, but like, okay, let me take a client for an example. We're doing a fat loss phase for her wedding. We're not dieting down into her wedding, but you know that there are a lot of things that surround a wedding. There are showers and bachelorettes and et cetera and et cetera. And what we are navigating is, how is she going to manage all of these things that are coming up that people are throwing for her, where there's probably going to be food. And so she was like, my bachelorette, I just want to have a good time. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's your hierarchy. That means for these other situations, we need to rein things in a little bit more, right? We're going to be more on track here. But this is a client that I've been working with for a while, and she doesn't have an issue with food or her relationship with food, right? Which comes into account here, where maybe that wouldn't be appropriate for a client.
But like, so I think this is an important delineation too, because then they say, I just want to have fun. Like that's different for everybody, because I don't really drink, right?
Right.
Like maybe 4 or 5 drinks per year, like realistically speaking. So for me, if I say I just want to have fun and I want to have a good time, like for me, that doesn't mean drinking. But for most people, that means a pretty copious amount of alcohol, which ends up being, obviously it's a toxin. It's not great for your body composition, if I'm like saying it nicely, right? It doesn't really provide you any benefit physiologically, and it also is very calorie dense. So like for me, when I think about this stuff, everything starts at mindset and like how you define those things. Where are you at in this stuff? I guess really what most people say, breaking down into your relationship with food or drinking or partying, whatever it might be. Because for somebody who I know that that's we'll say an issue for, right? In terms of their physique goals, we won't even get into the other stuff. For that person, I'm like, I'm way more hesitant to give them like the all clear, like let's make the most out of it, because I know that that person may be more on the end of, I'm going to fucking overdo it really hardcore, and I'm not going to make memories. I'm going to erase them. That's a blackout reference. I do that. Done it a lot when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I actually have a client who we're working on what types of activities can fulfill her when she is with her friends, because like drinking has been a big part of her life, and she has realized that that has actually been a toxic part of her life. And so she's been working on that relationship there, like with herself and her environment. But then she's really working on, okay, giving myself like I can have 1 drink and that's okay. Like, right, like she's giving herself some boundaries. And I think that when you start talking about yourself in terms of serving yourself appropriately, emotionally, like yeah, there's all of the physical stuff, but that also relates to yourself emotionally, spiritually, right? It comes into your mindset. And she simply just doesn't feel good when she indulges in alcohol. And she knows that she's used that as kind of a toxic crutch in the past. And so when we're talking about going out, it's creating boundaries about these types of things. It's creating conversations with people and having those like boundaries placed ahead of time to make sure that she comes out on the other end, not going down that rabbit hole. Cause yeah, like, sure, it's fine. I have a glass of alcohol probably once every 4 months. But that's because I have figured out that it doesn't serve me in a way that I really like. I don't like it. And so 9 times out of 10, a lot of clients of mine are actually finding that alcohol is something that was masking something else. And so then we're working on positive relationships with their body, with like figuring out with stress management and blah, blah, blah down that rabbit hole instead. How
I
do
like
you
what you
navigate alcohol, Sarah?
I'm like you guys. I don't really indulge. Maybe a couple of drinks a year, and everything like that. Cheers to a husband on the anniversary. Maybe a cheers at New Year's, and that's pretty much it. It's not really been. It was a place of mine, in college days, and we all had our fun there, of course, too. But I do also help some of my clients to navigate those weekend warriors, whatever you want to call them, as well. As far as like, hey, we're on point on macros Monday through Friday. When that Friday night hits, it's sushi night, or it's movie night with the kids, and then they open the wine, and then it escalates into a Saturday soccer game, and then a post celebration at like a burger place and stuff like that. Then it rolls into Sunday brunch, and by the time they get back to Monday, they're up 4 or 5 pounds. They don't know what happened, and then all of a sudden they're back on their game on Mondays. And so we're gaining and losing the same 4 or 5 pounds, and it took them a couple of tries of being like, hey, we can still be social, we can still go out and have these times with friends and family and make memories, because that's the reason why we're there. But we can have a little bit more discipline and have a little bit more of a plan going into these events to take out some anxiety and to build up that trust in ourselves, that we can actually follow through with the plan. Because I find that a lot of my clients had the best intentions going through into these weekends, but if they don't have the plan in place, and like you mentioned, just maybe having some boundaries on themselves too, of being like, after one or two, I'm done. And then if they don't do that, then they break that trust in themselves, and it's very hard for them to build that back up. But once we do, it builds up momentum, and it helps them kind of stick with it and have some semblance of a plan on those instances and in those times. And they are being a little bit more social, a little bit more flexible with themselves.
So like, I think it's so I still can't get over the thing. Just as like it's a toxic crutch, and I just keep thinking about like the toxic goo that they used to have as like a toy when we were kids, and a crutch that like has that all over it. And I'm just imagining somebody trying to use those crutches and just slipping and eating shit nonstop.
What was that show where you got like
You got
goo?
yeah.
Oh my God. Sarah,
It
how
was a
old?
Nickelodeon show.
Was it like
Yes.
Double Dare or something?
Oh, I don't
No.
know. You got like the slime.
You got
Yeah.
the slime, but like dumped on you. Okay, if you were a fucking 90s kid, you'd
Yes.
absolutely know what I'm talking about. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So there's that. I think it was Double Dare. Was the
That's
show,
what
by
I
the way.
said.
Yeah, Double Dare. So anyways, and I'm just like, at the same point, like when we talk about not drinking, I can only imagine how many people check out because they're like, fuck off, like get lost. And I'm just, yeah, I get it. And I've been there, like when I played music, our practice room, because our drummer's family owned the bar that we played at a lot of the time, was literally the liquor room in the bar. So I cannot tell you how much of a drinking issue I had back then. And so people are like, oh yeah, well, you had a drinking issue. Okay, sure. That doesn't mean that I necessarily still have a drinking issue. And that doesn't mean that I can't also just have one or two. I think the underlying thing that we see for a lot of people, it's like the all or nothing mentality. The moderation. Yeah, Jess, I already Googled. Jessica just messaged us in the group chat that it was Double Dare. I already did that, dog.
Okay, whatever.
So whatever, Steven. So just but so it's the okay, I'm on with the kids, I'm on at home, I'm on at work, I'm on this, I'm on, and having some like reasonable and productive or healthy way to not have to be on, so to speak. And like most people, I feel like haven't really dialed that in to be supportive of their other goals in terms of, all right, how do I check out? How do I turn off? How do I not have to carry all the stressors of every single day but not just leave them behind where I don't think about them? I feel like that's what always happens. Like, oh, I'm going to Vegas for the weekend. And I'm just like, Christ. It's like, okay, I know exactly what's happening. Hey, I'm going out here. Hey, I'm doing this. Like, hey, and for me, the biggest thing is, all right, well, how do I get them to realize that they can still enjoy those things? They can still have them. They can still have a drink. They can still have maybe a couple drinks, depending on where they're at. But that they're still that same person while they're there that hits the gym on a regular basis, that like eats the healthy foods, that decides to eat the veggies and the leaner proteins and do the things that if they're going to go over, it at least like moderates it so that they're not over as much, at least. It's not so emphatic, the change that we see.
Yeah. So do you get your clients to like do like a mental check-in, or I mean, other than like saying, okay, this is the plan, this is what we want to do, obviously like anticipating people being like, oh, it's only a drink, have another one, like anticipating like that pushback, because that like social pushback, there's only so much that we can do as coaches to like help our clients through these things. The other aspect of that is the client needs to also want that. And that's hard because I've been there. And I know lots of people can like relate to that, is like you need to put in the work as well as a client, in terms of communicating this with your loved ones or social circle, and doing that work and saying no, and doing that hard choice, or like moderating it to some extent, and being okay with that. That's
Yeah.
not that's the hard shit.
If you want it.
If you want it. If you don't, that's totally cool. Like what we're talking about today is about the people who like want to continue to maintain their health and fitness throughout these things. Right? Like if you don't want to do these things, you don't have to. And that's another thing at the end of the day, like it is a choice. It is a choice that you are going into whatever this is, a free meal, a date night, a birthday. People will come up with excuses if they do not want to do something. I know, like we've all been there. We're all human. But you need to also put in the work. If you want it, you need to have those hard situations, those hard conversations with yourself, as well as with like the people that you're going to be involved with.
Yeah. And I think that's where the disconnect sometimes happens, is like, are the person's efforts lining up with what their goals actually are? You know, every day you talk a lot about choice, Jess, and I think that's a fantastic point. Every day we make choices. Every time we have a choice to put this food in our mouth versus this food. I could have, my wonderful, stir fry bowl, or I could have a bowl of ice cream. Each one of those kinds of things.
You should have used the word wonderful for both.
I like both of them.
They're both wonderful.
That you can make them wonderful. I think that's also sometimes where people are like, oh, I don't want to eat my clean or my healthy food. I'm like, you can make all these things taste wonderful with very simple food preparations, spices, flavorings. We all do them. But yes, they're both wonderful and they both serve us in different ways. And I think that's also a choice as well. And so I talk to my clients a lot about aligning our efforts to our goals and making sure that every choice that we make is aligning up. And like you said, Jess, too, like having those hard conversations. I know we're not fans of people that do, food pushers or anything like that as well. I know it's around the holidays. Maybe it's your grandmother's, apple pie or whatever like that. She puts them on your plate. You can say thank you and you can walk away and you don't have to eat it. Just because it's there on your plate, you don't have to eat it if it's not in your plan. Stephen, don't make that face.
Sorry. I don't know if you know everybody's mother or grandmother. And I'm in disagreement with you guys on this one. I think food pushers can be absolutely great in the right circumstance for the right people. I love them, and everybody knows that. Like, Paul calls me Savory Steve all the time.
Oh yeah.
And I also call BS. Like, your like healthy foods are not going to taste the same as the unhealthy foods. They're not going to taste the same as pure straight sugar or something of the other, or the really high fat thing. It's not the same. So I don't know that it, like, I would disagree. I don't think it's fair to tell people like, yeah, it's going to be just as good, or to like give that impression, because it's not the same thing. It's specifically not supposed to be the same thing. I think we can do things to get close. I think we can have things that are substitutes that are good enough, that are like a nice, like middle ground. Right. And I think that's the hard part, because we all want to have it all. Right. We want to have it all. We want to be able to do all the things. We want to be able to make whatever decisions we want without the consequences. That's normal human behavior, at least at this point in time. Right. But like, you can't expect to have the whatever stir fry bowl like be as good as the ice cream if you're always thinking about ice cream. And so I think this is where this topic becomes so important, because if I tell you can never fucking have ice cream again, well,
You're going to want it.
Yeah.
like, that's all I want, one. And two, if I can't have it, I can't have it, I can't have it. The time when I do have it, I'm going to go so hard. I literally had like an hour conversation with a client about this yesterday because I don't know when I'm going to be able to have it again. And because I haven't had it in so long, now it tastes so much better, at least initially. Like I'm going to eat all that I can because I've already like messed up, quote unquote. Like that's the mentality, that's the thought process, right? And so I think that it's super important that we're realistic that, yeah, I don't like drinking, but I understand that you're probably going to have a drink here and there. Yeah, ice cream is not going to be the best thing for your weight loss goals, but I understand that there's going to be times where you really want to have ice cream and it's going to be worth it for you to have it. So how do we make that work? How do we make that be moderate enough to where you can still have the ice cream? You can still forego the stir fry bowl. You can have the drink and still make some semblance of progress towards where you want. Or even in some cases where people don't understand, like we've failed to realize how big of a win it is, even just maintain.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal for most people. Like every day I went to Jamaica internationally last weekend to celebrate my 5-year wedding anniversary with my husband. I had dessert every single night and it was fantastic. But my other meals for that day were full of some protein, were full of some fruits and vegetables, some local fare in there as well. And so, I think it is about having that flexibility and being reasonable with yourself because yes, I agree with you, Stephen. If we constantly think about that ice cream, if we are restricting ourselves in that way and not exercising a little bit more maybe discipline in those actions and finding that messy middle ground and finding that flexibility there, then it is going to be a problem for a lot of people. Then they are going to end up with bad relationship with food focus and things like that we don't want them to have. And so I like, educating clients about how to be flexible, how to make those solid decisions and still indulge when we want to actually indulge when the food is there and it tastes great and enjoy that and have a fun, positive memory associated with that with friends and family.
And this is where I think like Jess and I were both like, I don't like the term mindful indulgences. Because when we hear the word indulge,
I'm like, you're going to indulge.
I think of like the Bram Stokers back in the day, like when you weren't able to see adult films and you're like, there's all the people like having that little orgy thing going on. Like those people were indulging, like they were going hard. None of them were worried about stopping. You know what I mean?
I don't
Like,
know what you mean.
it's an old school Dracula thing. I think I'm remembering that right. If not, like there's some weird shit going on. So just ignore that. But like I never hear anybody being like, I'm gonna indulge and having 2 bites of a cookie and being done. Like that's not my go-to when I think of that. When I think of
I'm
somebody
going to order
indulging,
a 6-pack of crumble and eat the fuck out of that.
I thought you were gonna say just I'm gonna go to get a 6-pack.
No.
Go get some natty ice from the corner store,
Oh goodness.
Like because I think that's what that mindset kind of goes into. It's like once I start indulging, I want to continue indulging. Whereas, and I also think that the indulge word, like it prefaces something we're not supposed to be doing, right? Like, ooh, I shouldn't, but I'll indulge. Like, okay, but why can't we have some semblance of ice cream? Why can't we have a drink? Why can't we have X, Y, Z? Like, there might be some reasons why we shouldn't have it, but as adults, we pretty much can do whatever the hell we want within reason. So I think that this understanding or the change in the thought process of, oh, I shouldn't, it's like I can, does it benefit me, does it not benefit me? And if you come in and you say, oh, it doesn't benefit me, great. You knowingly are making that decision, and then you can do your best to moderate it. Because the other issue is like a lot of people, they don't know how to stop or they can't stop. Their hunger signaling's off. It's different. There's a whole thing, and we can go into the competitors and the physiology behind it and yada yada. But like, I never really had issues stopping eating something or putting on weight, but that's not everybody. And in fact, that's probably not most people based on like society today. So I have to like really step back and be like, but what's the difference there? And how do we help other people find the difference there so that they can look at things in a new light and a new manner so that they can start being more successful with, I won't even say indulging, but like utilizing things that are more calorie dense or maybe less beneficial for fat loss, and just looking at their food differently. Because I think the indulgence goes back into some things are good, some things are bad.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I can take like I like Sarah's example of like Jamaica, but if we're talking about like a social situation, because again, there's probably going to be like barbecues and like potlucks and things like that. Number one, my personal rule of thumb, because I used to overeat at social events all the fucking time. Stephen can tell you. Because what?
Why do we always have to cut? Stephen will
Because
fucking
you
tell
know.
you. Stephen knows.
Stephen knows. I'm not lying. But I, number one, was so stressed about my fucking macros the other 98% of the time that I had anxiety going into these events just flat out because it was an unknown. And so that's my mindset that I needed to work on. And number two, I have major social anxiety. And so the social events meant I had to have small talk with people, and I hate small talk. And so it gave me, like, eating gave me something to do. It gave me something to do with my hands. I could be like talking about the food or whatever. And so it helped me with social anxiety. Did it actually help me? No, because I would leave these events feeling shitty about myself, feeling like I always just ate around the table and not being able to poop for 4 days. So the way that I overcame these things was I always made sure I had a diet like free whatever beverage in my hand. So like soda or water or whatever, because there I would occupy my hands. I also had to work on my relationship with myself and be comfortable with myself in these social situations and just be like, chill. Maybe I had a gummy before. I don't know. Whatever. I had to work on that relationship. I also had to work on my relationship with food outside of these social events, like chill the fuck out with my macros and my food overall. And so strategically, when I would go into these events, I would pick out things that maybe I didn't like that I really wanted to try. So if it was like a potluck situation or there were snacks all over the place, I would make myself a plate. And instead of being like, I need to be so good, I'm just going to have like the vegetables and that's all. And then I would end up overeating. I would pick specific things in moderation that looked interesting to me. And that's it. Like, and I would be very mindful of the things that I knew wouldn't work well with me, like cheese. And so I had to like work at this, and it's still stuff that I work on even now. But I'm much better at it, and I'm much more comfortable with myself and who I am and what I stand for. And I don't give a fuck if people are looking at what I'm doing or eating or not eating or whatever. But that was my relationship with myself that I had to heal before going into these events and being able to moderate it a little bit better.
I like that because every situation, I think that you continue to learn from each one. And I think that doing the internal work, I think is huge. You know, making sure that you are on just a really good page mindset wise and figuring out what it is and going deeper with those kinds of anxieties with you. And I'm very proud of you for sharing that. So thank you, Jess.
Yeah. And
I have no feelings. Stone
Stephen
cold.
fucking heard that shit. A what?
So like, again, this goes back to like, you have to have the underlying knowledge, experience, education with food to know what moderate even is.
Mhm.
Like, yes, you have to like look at the wording and how you think about stuff, mindset and blah, blah, blah. But that's also combined with knowing enough and having enough experience with food, nutrition labels, knowing what things tend to look like, those kind of things, to be able to have what is a reasonable estimate of what that food intake that you're estimating or just enjoying realistically is. Because again, huge portion of the populace really underestimates their food intake. Like they're eating quite a bit more than what they think they are in terms of the calorie intakes. So if you don't pair that with that underlying nutrition knowledge and education and understanding, and yes, experience, you really only have half the battle there for being ready to try and like utilize free meals, untracked days, whatever you want to call it. Because cheat meals, I think, would be in this conversation too. But I don't think any of us like the term cheat meals because it's essentially, it's like that same thing. And yeah, semantics, blah, 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 whatever. But the associations that those words have matters and how you approach and perceive the situation. So even though, yeah, it's semantics, I would argue to say that in many cases, those semantics are still important for how people mentally approach these kinds of things.
Yeah, because I think it still relates back to that all or nothing mentality of just like, oh, I'm good, or these are my good foods and these are my cheat foods, or these are my good foods, these are my bad foods. I still think it creates that mentality. And so I personally use the term untracked meals or untracked days with my clients when we do get there. And sometimes I test them out with them, not even in social situations. Sometimes I test them out on a random Tuesday or Wednesday with them and being like, yeah, eat the same food that you normally would be eating that you've already prepped for yourself. Just don't put it into your fitness tracker. Let's try that, truly having an untracked day to see how they do it first time out mindset wise. If it goes well and they felt pretty good about it, then we might try it again on a date night of having an untracked meal, and then we kind of build that up slowly. But I think a lot of people are impatient when it comes to these kinds of things as well, of wanting their relationship with food or their mentality or their social anxieties or whatever it is to be fixed yesterday. And they're not willing to put in the work like you've done, like Jess has done, like Stephen has done, with finding the root cause of these kind of things and getting in the reps before maybe they even go out and practice it in a real social situation where they could be tempted by other things.
Yeah, I like the like free meal at home idea. I've mentioned it before, but like I have a client who loves to cook. And so I'm like, let's do a free meal at home and something that you cook, but like legit cook. Like don't like macro cook, like fucking cook. Um, or, if we're tiptoeing into the free meal realm, I'll be like, okay, let's do something that is quote unquote safe, like a beef tenderloin. Like, on the menu, it says a 6-ounce beef tenderloin, or like, cool, great. Right. Or, some sushi. Okay. What are you going to get for sushi? Because I absolutely know we can go ham on the sushi situation. So we're going to it's a little bit more like of a planned untracked, right? At first to, again, give you structure within flexibility. And if I'm working with a client, I mean, I'm going to be honest, like 9 times out of 10, if I have a client and they're like, hey, I'm probably going to have alcohol. Like I have a client who's going camping. We've worked together for years. She's a friend actually of mine. I know what it's like when she goes camping. She fucking preps her food. But she's like, I might have a drink or two. And she was like, should I track it? I was like, dude, don't track that. Like, but that's because I know that she has put in the reps of doing free meals before. She's gone to like a 5-day all-inclusive and just intuitively eaten. I've also hung out with her in person and I know her. And I know where her relationship with food is at, and as well as relationship with herself and alcohol. And she just doesn't drink a whole lot. So I know that 1 drink or 2 is just going to be good for her. Right. So it really is kind of like putting these things into practice, and you're going to fuck up. Like you're going to overeat sometimes and it's going to get out of control. And then you go, okay, like why? You want to pinpoint, like me and my social anxiety. Why did I always overeat when I had a bunch of people at my house or I was at like a party? It's because there were snacks everywhere and I didn't know how to handle my mental anxiety. And so that's how I handled it. So you need to like mess up in order to learn, right? Like you have to fail in order to figure that shit out sometimes.
I think the reason that is because, and for you in particular too, you always had to be perfect. And so if you were always having to be perfect because you couldn't let anybody down, you couldn't let coach down, you couldn't let yourself down, you couldn't you had all this like kind of pressure that anxiety was putting on you. So when you're in a situation where the levee breaks, so to speak, like, well, of course, if the levee is breaking, we're going to have floods. It's going to be an issue. That's why we want to periodically let a little bit out here and there so that we don't, have issues downriver.
Right.
And so for most people, you have to figure out like when is the time to push and to really go hard with the diet. Like if you're in prep, yeah, we probably have to be really on it, at least by and large for the most part, if you want to get on stage being truly late. That doesn't mean that there can't still be room for free meals in the plan at some point, but I have one client that's always asking for a burger and fries, and he still has a good amount of weight to lose. So he can't do a burger and fries every week. Like we can't do a free meal every week if he wants to be ready on time for the shows that he wants to do. It's not realistic. But if we continue doing well, we can have them here and there. We can make periodic stops. I think, and the marketing is a big part of this because we're marketed like crazy fast results for our physique and for our weight to change and all these other things. So that creates the expectation that's unrealistic in the first place. And so we have to understand that, and then we can start working into, okay, well, what looks realistic for us? Because if you have a timeline on things, if you want to make that timeline, it's going to take a certain amount of work and consistency and hitting numbers and being adherent to the plan. If you don't have a timeline on things, I could care less. As long as we're not making negative progress and we're slowly getting towards where we want to be, dude, that could take 3 years for all I care. Doesn't bother me any. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost in the sauce on it too, is they want to have the best of both worlds. They want to have it all, which again, normal for people, right? But if I want to be stage lean, I can't eat all the food. If I want to be stage lean by a certain point, there's going to be days where I'm not feeling good. There's going to be days where I'm hungry. And maybe, yes, a diet break is appropriate in that, depending on like what my history is and where I'm at and yada, yada, whatever. Maybe a free meal is appropriate in that. But the answer also might be that it's not.
Yeah. And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's.
But where people get kind of tripped up is like, we have this challenge throughout the summer, but I really encourage a lot of people to kind of like look at what their summer entails and ask themselves if fat loss is a target that they need to have happen during summer. Now, me, I could care less, right? But some other people, like I know Christina has mentioned multiple times, summer for her is like outside with the beers and the barbecues and cool. And some people, it's a lot of travel and with their families, etc. And I just had this conversation with a client actually today, and we're planning a fat loss phase starting next month, fat loss phase for about 3 months. And then we are reverse dieting, and the goal is to maintain through the holidays. So when you have an expectation of just maintenance, especially when you are about to go through periods or phases of life that are kind of chaotic in terms of whatever that looks like. I also have a client right now who is moving and changing jobs at the same time. You bet your ass. And she's a competitor. When we talked about it, and she was like, I don't think I should compete this year. And I was like, fuck yeah, we should not. And so it's about maintaining, and that's a good goal. That's a good goal, especially when maybe you've never done that before. Maybe you've only ever lost and gained. And so why don't you have that expectation of maintaining? Because that's a pretty fucking good goal, especially when a lot of people aren't able to do that, right? And so that also gives you the ability, like Steven said, without having a timeline on things, like you're able to practice more flexibility and explore some of these things that we talked about that you need to maybe sometimes try out and maybe fuck up, and like learn a lot about yourself. You can learn a lot about yourself in a maintenance phase in terms of you do need to balance your health and fitness goals. If that is something that really does matter to you, then you need to keep on track with that. But then it's okay to like indulge, or like not indulge, but just enjoy some of these other aspects that you maybe need to pull back on or use less of when you need to like go into a more fat loss phase or something like that.
Yeah, no, I love all of those points. And I think that, I was just thinking about, I was like, did I learn a ton about myself and my relationship with food during contest prep last year? I'm like, not so much, but I've learned a whole lot more, I think, during maintenance phases and building phases about relationship with food, about how my body responds to different things, when I'm not tired and hungry and brain foggy. And so I feel like we're definitely not at our most vibrant towards those kinds of things. And I think also, like you mentioned too, being realistic with ourselves about what the calendar actually looks like. I did have one transformation challenge client who had to travel for work every single weekend. And there was a point in the challenge where he was just like, I can't go be in fat loss. I needed to stop because he was gaining and losing. And it wasn't also, he was based upon like work dinners and things that he had to attend. He tried to make the best choices he could, but with like inflammation and sleep and stuff like that, the deck was stacked against him. And I'm just like, yes, I know your goal is fat loss, but at some points we have to be honest with ourselves about what is realistic for us at this point. Not saying it can't ever happen, but this season, this point in your life right now, it doesn't seem as realistic. And that's okay, because then we can have the goal to maintain, then we can be more flexible with ourselves, and then we can give our body the little bit more of a break that it needs, and then we push hard, and the next time we can do it for fat loss.
So, I mean, I think this also, like, one thing that nobody likes to admit that they just don't care as much as they say they care. Like, it is also okay to be burnt out, to just be over, to like, I've been doing this for over a decade. Sometimes I'm just burnt out. I just don't care that much about going to the gym some days. Guess what? I'll still go to the gym a couple days out of the week. I'll do something. I'm not way off the reservation, but like, I'm also realistic and honest with myself that like, I'm not super motivated for this right now. I don't actually care. I have other things that are taking my attention and that are really demanding me to be somewhere else mentally versus trying to push crazy hard in training or be super on it with my macros and track every single thing that I do. And I think that like, people talk about quitting as like a failure thing, but there are certain times when the right decision is to quit doing something, or when the right decision is to stop, right? So prep, for example, there are certain indicators and times when you should absolutely stop prepping. You should absolutely stop dieting. This gentleman here is another example. He should stop dieting. He's working his ass off during the week. He's not able to do anything on the weekend. He's spinning his wheels, putting all this effort forth for absolutely no return on the investment. Why would you keep doing that? At some point, you have to look at what you're getting out of it and what you're putting into it, and make that decision. I had a guy in the transformation challenge that we reversed the entire time. And I read his thing last week on the podcast, and it was like, it's amazing because now he's realizing that he can still maintain a fairly lean body composition, but also feel really good and not have to murder himself the whole time. But if you are so caught up in this thought process that you have to do this, that you have to lose weight, you have to do X, Y, Z all the time, how in the hell are you going to find out what works for you and where that kind of line of moderation is at? Like you're never going to have the opportunity to do that. So you have to be open and honest with yourself. Say, like, okay, I really don't care about the gym that much. All right, cool. Well, I'm still going to go a couple days a week at least because my health is still important to me. And I know that it's not always about how I'm feeling, but maybe this isn't the time of my life where I'm going to the gym 5 days a week. Maybe this isn't the time in my life where I'm hard tracking every single bite that I take, every single meal. Maybe this is the time in my life where I'm still in it enough, right? I'm doing good enough to like tread water, but I ain't swimming. And like, that can be cool too. And when you start getting that mindset down, it's much easier to like have some of the food that you've wanted and not eat all of it. It's much easier to have a drink and not the whole bottle. It's much easier to find that, again, quote unquote, balance of how do we make it work, but not have it necessarily be so overbearing to where we're just out. We don't have anything left to give because we all have a certain amount of bandwidth. Like, cool, maybe we shouldn't be dieting. Maybe we shouldn't be doing X. Maybe we shouldn't be doing Y, Z. But let's also be honest with ourselves about that and not have to feel like we have somehow failed because we're not super jazzed about it or because we're not super motivated.
Yeah, I think people also get it in their head that like if they hire a coach, they already have to be doing all of these things and they have to like be ready to like give their 100% and all of that. And like, or they're working with a coach and they already had that established. And then they're like, oh, wow, like I can't train 5 days a week anymore. Oh, okay. I'm just going to quit coaching. And you know what? Maybe it is like, maybe coaching or working with a coach is not going to be the right choice for that person at the time. So putting that out there. But that also doesn't mean that you should just leave. I mean, at least from my perspective, like I am going to be here for my clients to adjust and support them throughout their journey. And that journey has various phases. And sometimes we just pull back on training. Like it's not a big deal. And then we adjust some of the food. Like my client who is switching jobs and moving like to a different city. I was like, okay, we've already been working together for a while. I was like, chillax on training this week. She's a competitor, which is also why I'm saying chillax because she's A-type. I brought down a lot of her intensifiers. I was like, we are not doing any kind of intense training this week or next week. We're going to allow for some free meals or a fully untracked day. I want to give you some flexibility there, right? So it's okay. Also, I want people to know that you don't need to go in and be like 100% all the time with just to work with a coach as like a prerequisite. Like that's not a thing. And if you go in with that mindset, then like you're probably never going to get there because we can't always be 100% of the time, like all of the time. And I'm not saying that you just need to like freaking work with your coach forever. Also, that's not a thing. If you need to take time away from coaching, that's also okay. But I think sometimes people get it in their minds that it's like, well, it's my protocol to like train 5 days a week and be on top of my plan and blah, blah, blah. And I can't right now. So I'm just going to drop it. And it's like, no. Like your coach, if your coach is a good coach, your coach is going to be there for you and to help support you through whatever it is. So like if you need what? Well, not whatever it is. Don't be so fucking literal.
Oh, I was more talking about if your coach is a good coach. I was like, oh.
That's also what I put a disclaimer. But anyways, I've lost my train of thought. Fuck it.
It's all good. No, I agree with you, Jess. I think that people they're so hyped on the consult call. They're just like, I'm ready to give it all. And then like 2 or 3 weeks in, they're just like, okay, I'm doing good. And then like by week 4, 5, or 6, especially with some of the challengers, it's like, ooh, life is happening, or they miss a check-in, or they apologize to me. And I'm like, why are you apologizing to me for not getting all of your workouts in? I was like, that because your kid was sick and had to come home from school and he had to watch, like, don't apologize for me about those kinds of things. That's not, but they feel bad. And I'm just like, you shouldn't feel bad about life happening, and if it comes down to you making a different decision or different choice, then that's the one thing. But I think, having some grace with yourself, I think is also key of being like, hey, yeah, I didn't have it this week. This week was kids were sick or kids were out of school. I had to take care of them. I had to go take them to 5 different things like Christina's doing today. She couldn't be on the podcast today because she's running her kids around to all these different activities. And I'm just like, there are certain times and certain, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a whole year of a season of your life where this is not your biggest priority, but it's still a priority for you. Like you mentioned, Stephen, like health is still a priority. It may not be on your radar to being like, I want to hit my PR goals. I want to do this. I want to do that. But it may still be a part of your life. And so I think that is where that quote unquote balance comes into play, but it is the hardest thing. But it still doesn't mean you don't talk to your coach about that. And your coach can definitely kind of meet you where you are at that time and at that season of your life.
So I tell people on a pretty consistent basis, if I have been your coach for any significant amount of time and you still need me to coach you, I probably didn't do my damn job right. Part of our job as coaches should be to educate and empower you guys to also be able to manage things on your own. Because I think that's part of being confident with handling these things. I think that's why people reach out to us so much. Like, hey, coach, I'm getting ready to go on a trip, or hey, coach, I want to do this, or hey, coach, XYZ. And it's because if I've truly empowered you and educated you on how to handle these situations, there become less and less questions and less concerns with those things as time goes on. Because you already have some semblance of maybe experience that we've worked through. We have the level, some semblance of education that we've worked through for what maybe calories entail, and paying attention to what you feel good with and what you don't feel good with. And understanding that, hey, one day is not going to break the bank here. And so I think that it also comes down to how we view ourselves in those situations and stacking confidence with that. And so maybe it goes back to like what Jessica said in terms of having like some structured freedom there. It's not what you normally do. There's still a plan for it. It's not going to be anything too crazy, but it's something different that starts getting us out of that comfort zone, right? Puts us in the party with maybe there's just some buffalo chicken dip there, doesn't have all the goodies, but there's a couple of goodies there. So Jess can practice, right? So even if she does go a little bit overboard, there's no way it's going to break the bank. It's not going to be so far gone to where it's an issue. And then building and working from there. Because if you have no experience doing it and you have no education, of course you're not going to be confident to go into a trip or a meal that you're going to handle it well. Just trying to hit the side of a barn in the dark. Like, okay, good luck, dog. So we have to have some semblance of that in there to where, like, even if we weren't at a place where we could utilize free meals very well or regularly, we still know how to do it. Because the next part of that is like actually getting yourself to do it. And that's the mental, and it goes back to the mindset stuff. But if you don't have the tools to do it, like, I didn't do my job preparing you for that.
I agree.
Totally.
I like how this podcast has evolved.
So like a Ninja Turtle now, or is it like Master Splinter?
No, it's like no, like not like a Ninja Turtle, but more like a Transformer.
Oh, like Beast Wars
Like
Transformers, or
Optimus Prime.
like regular Transformers?
No, like
I like the
Optimus
Beast
Prime.
Wars one. But that was regular Transformers. There were a ton of different Transformers, like where they transformed into different things. Like I think
OG.
Optimus Prime was like an ape in the Beast Wars one, and then OG he was like the semi truck. There were
Yeah,
other ones. Yeah.
semi-truck.
Okay.
Not a weird Beast Wars. No, like a
No, that's
fucking
what I watched when I was a kid. That was what was on Saturday mornings. That was great.
Yeah, it started off like a semi-truck of us not liking the topic wording, and it transformed into a fucking sweet ass Optimus Prime of self-reflection.
I don't even know, like, but we literally explained like that semantics are important and why. You know what I mean? Like, because if you just, it's face value. It's marketing 101.
Yeah.
Right? It's nonstop. Our industry does it and every industry does it, blah, blah, blah. That's like what they tell you they're going to sell you is oftentimes not what they sell you. So like the idea of mindful indulgence is free meal, cheat meal, blah, blah. It's not always what you think it is based on what those words make you think or feel.
Right.
You have to change your definition to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And just dive a little bit deeper into those kind of things. That's very surface level as far as like, yes, I can have a free meal, but how do I actually feel about it? What do I actually want in that? And how do I actually feel afterwards? And what do I learn from that?
Dive in. It's like I'm on a podcast with two swimmers. Christ.
Imagine.
Is Guinness back there?
No. He's
Oh.
I
down.
thought I saw his like half little body sticking out there.
Yeah, no, I got him a new bed, but he's now downstairs. I don't know. Senior citizen didn't want to come upstairs.
I don't let mine in the office when I'm doing this. They too crazy. They always trying to eat each other and bark.
Yeah, yours are wild.
It's the Dane. She's the problem.
Fair.
Yeah.
Mine's a
All right.
daycare, so it's all good. She's taken care of.
Oof. All right. All right. So I guess we're gonna end it there, and we will talk to you guys next week.